A red light bar, a chrome grille, a cab and chassis truck sitting under fluorescent lights in a fire museum in Bellflower, California. Squad 51. The restorers who rebuilt it are proud of the work. They should be. But dig into the paperwork and something strange surfaces. The VIN on the dash doesn't match the year most fans assume they're looking at. 3 trucks played that role across the run of Emergency. The first 2 disappeared completely. Nobody knows where. Some of the most recognizable vehicles in American television history got 6-figure auctions and forensic paper trails. Others got sold off like any other used car and vanished without anyone noticing they were gone. Here's what actually happened, in order from the quietest fate to the loudest reversal. Squad 51, Emergency. Confirmed, the truck on display at the Los Angeles County Fire Museum is a 1972 Dodge D300, hand-built by Universal Studios to Los Angeles County Fire Department specifications because the department itself couldn't turn one around fast enough. After the show ended, the studio donated it back to the county. It ran occasional reserve duty for 2 decades before retiring into the museum in 1999. Here's the part fans don't know. 3 different D300 chassis played Squad 51 across the show's run: 1972, 1973, 1974, with the same light bar and equipment box physically unbolted and moved from truck to truck between seasons, so viewers would never notice the swap. The museum's own paperwork and the truck's actual VIN plate don't fully agree on which of the 3 survived. Some records call it the 1972 original. The stamped VIN says 1974. The first 2 trucks, the ones that wore that equipment box before it moved to the survivor, are gone. No sale record, no scrapyard photo. Reports suggest they went the way most retired production vehicles did in the 1970s. Nobody wrote it down. The Brady Bunch, Plymouth Satellite. No confirmed survivor exists. Across 5 seasons, the Brady family wagon changed almost every year, each one leased fresh from Chrysler under a studio agreement, and, once the season wrapped, returned and quietly resold as an ordinary used car. Nobody flagged them for preservation. Nobody had a reason to. It was a station wagon in a sitcom about a blended family, not a stunt car worth locking away. One documented case comes close to closure. In 2025, a lifelong fan named Todd Puzzy, who'd grown up riding in his own family's 1972 satellite wagon in a household that looked a lot like the Bradys, finally tracked down and bought a matching 1972 model after years of searching. It isn't a screen-used car. It can't be. There isn't one to find. That's the fate. Not lost in a dramatic sense, just never considered worth keeping. The Rockford Files, Pontiac Firebird. Confirmed, and unusually personal. James Garner didn't just drive Rockford's gold Firebird. After the series ended in 1980, he bought one of the 3 sound cars from the final season and kept it for himself, driving it on his own time until 1981. Then he sold it. It changed hands several times before landing with collector Steve Reich, who commissioned restorer Mike Flaherty to bring it back to exact 1978 filming spec: original microphone junction box, drilled recording wire holes, skid plates still intact underneath. In 2019, it crossed the block at Barrett-Jackson and sold for $115,000. A second surviving Firebird has its own quieter story. An Australian fan named Cam bought one at a 2015 Mecum auction, shipped it to Sydney, and has spent the years since carefully preserving it, including a 2016 meeting with Garner's daughter, who gave him one of her father's original show jackets to go with the car. 2 cars, 2 people who simply decided not to let go. Starsky and Hutch, Ford Grand Torino. Confirmed, 3 original Torinos survived from the roughly half-dozen Ford supplied for the show. Corroborated, car number 1 was displayed at the Peterson Automotive Museum in Los Angeles as recently as 2023. Another lives at the auto collections inside the Imperial Palace in Las Vegas. Here's the complication. Ford loved the show's ratings so much that in 1976, It built 1,305 factory Starsky and Hutch Special Edition Gran Torinos for public sale. Same red and white paint, same vector stripe, sold at dealerships to anyone who wanted the look. Decades of resale, restoration, and tribute building have followed. Some sources estimate fewer than 50 of even the factory replicas remain in original condition today. The result is a strange kind of erasure by popularity. The show's real car is buried under thousands of copies built to look exactly like it, some of them now old enough and worn enough to pass for the genuine thing at a glance. Miami Vice, Ferrari Testarossa. Confirmed, Ferrari North America donated 2 black 1986 Testarossas to the production after a legal dispute over Miami Vice's earlier use of unlicensed Daytona replicas. Both were quickly repainted white. Accounts differ on why, ranging from a paint mishap on set to producer Michael Mann simply deciding black photographed poorly at night. The off-screen story is better than the on-screen one. Building 2 irreplaceable Ferraris was not something the production could risk on stunt work. So, builder Carl Roberts took a 1972 Di Tommaso Pantera, raised it, reinforced it, and fitted it with custom Testarossa body panels, a fabrication so extensive that crew nicknamed it the D-Tarossa. It absorbed the crashes and quick-change camera work so the real cars never had to. One Hero Testarossa went into storage the moment filming wrapped in 1989 and stayed there until 2015, when it resurfaced with just over 16,000 miles on the odometer and Ferrari Classique certification confirming its screen history. It's changed hands at auction more than once since. Magnum PI Ferrari 308 GTS. This is the control case, what a fate looks like when almost nothing is left to guess at. Confirmed, chassis 28251, one of roughly 15 308s Ferrari supplied across the show's 8 seasons, appeared in the pilot episode and stayed in rotation through the first season. Tom Selleck stood 6 feet 4. The seat was specially modified to fit him, then returned to factory spec once filming wrapped. After the show, the car went back to Ferrari North America in New Jersey, was repainted and resold as a used Ferrari, a footnote in its own history at the time. Decades later, the paper trail holds. Ferrari historian Marcel Massini and the F-Register authenticated the chassis. The car sold through Bring a Trailer in 2025 for $115,000, failed to meet a reserve at a GAA Classic Cars auction the following month, and crossed the block again at Barrett Jackson's Palm Beach sale in April 2026, this time with no reserve at all. Every step of this car's life is documented. That's rare enough on this list to be the exception that proves the rule. Charlie's Angels, Ford Mustang Cobra II. Unresolved, genuinely, currently unresolved. Farrah Fawcett's Cobra II, blue-striped 302 V8 under the hood, driven on-screen with enough charisma to single-handedly prop up sales of what most enthusiasts consider the weakest Mustang generation ever built, became one of the most photographed cars of the 1970s. And then, it simply disappears from the record. No documentation exists tracing what happened to the screen-used cars after the series ended in 1981. Owner forums and collector communities have debated it for years. Reports occasionally surface. Someone claims to own one. A rumor circulates that a car is sitting in a private collection somewhere, but nothing has been independently verified. The trail goes cold at the studio gate. It's one of the most recognizable cars of its decade, and nobody can currently prove where it went. The A-Team, GMC Vandura. Confirmed, 6 original Vanduras were built for the show's 5-season run, customized by legendary car builder George Barris, the same man behind the 1966 Batmobile. Corroborated with some conflict between sources, one of the 6 is displayed at the Cars of the Stars Motor Museum in Keswick, England. Other accounts place a surviving van at the Orlando Auto Museum and a stunt van at the Hollywood Cars Museum in Las Vegas, but exact counts of how many of the original 6 are accounted for today vary depending on which source you check. Nobody has published a definitive all 6 located inventory. What's certain is the split itself. Some are preserved in museums on 2 different continents. Others are simply unaccounted for, 30-plus years on, in a way nobody has fully resolved. If any of this makes you want to own a piece of it, know this going in. Replica saturation is the single biggest risk in this hobby. The Starsky and Hutch Torino is the cautionary tale. Ford's own 1,305 factory tributes, built the same year the show is airing, have muddied the water so thoroughly that even experienced collectors sometimes can't separate a genuine screen car from a very good period-correct copy without paper to back it up. That paper is everything. Look for F-register letters and Ferrari Classique certification on anything Ferrari adjacent. That's what separated Magnum's 308 and the Miami Vice Testarossa from every other 308 or Testarossa built that decade. Look for Marty reports on Ford products. Look for original studio invoices, dealer delivery paperwork, or a direct letter from a production company confirming screen use, the way the Rockford Firebird carries a letter from Garner's own production company. Price spread on this category is wide. A rescued, non-screen-used period wagon like a Brady-era Satellite can still be found for four figures if you're patient and not chasing provenance. A documented screen-used muscle car, a Torino, a Firebird, a Vandura, tends to land in the low to mid-six figures depending on condition and paper trail. A fully certified Ferrari with an unbroken chain of custody like Magnum's 308 competes at the top of that range and above it. These cars surface at Barrett-Jackson, Mecum, and R.M. Sotheby's most reliably, but not exclusively. More than one vehicle on this list turned up first in a barn, a junkyard, or a routine estate sale, discovered by someone who recognized what they were looking at before anyone else did. Line them up and a pattern emerges that has nothing to do with how famous a car was. The ones that survived did so because a specific person decided at some specific moment that the trouble of keeping them was worth it. A museum that didn't have to take a donation. A fan who spent years finding a truck his own dad used to drive. A collector who pulled a discarded Trans Am out of a junkyard instead of walking past it. The ones that didn't survive just didn't have that person, not because they were less loved, because nobody happened to be standing there when it mattered. Maybe that's the most honest ending here. Some things last because someone fought to keep them. Some things last simply because they were never real enough to lose.